This is part 4 of our Fantastic Four lore and story series. This is the final episode. This is Invisible Woman, and this is the story of Marvel Rivals. Invisible Woman is the final member that we haven't discussed yet of the Fantastic Four, about her story and where she fits in the lore of Marvel Rivals. However, because this is the last one, we will review the other stories as well, very briefly at the end, to see whereabouts everyone is. So Invisible Woman, Susan Storm. If you're not familiar with Susan Storm, then let's get right into it. Cosmic rays altered Susan Storm on a cellular level, granting her the ability to generate impenetrable force fields and to make herself fade from sight in an instant. Despite her frequent lack of visibility, it has always been perfectly clear that Sue is the force holding her family, the Fantastic Four, together. After the time stream entanglement, the Invisible Woman has taken full advantage of her powers, using stealth to explore locations too dangerous for her fellow heroes, especially going on rescue missions for civilians trapped by the creatures of the night. So she's using her abilities to help people, to go and do dangerous activities and protect people from these vampires. So let's get into reading her full lore. Susan Richards took a deep breath as she stood by the window of the Baxter building and gazed out at the city bathed in darkness. According to the atomic clock that her husband Reed had installed on the kitchen wall, sunrise should have been over 2 hours ago. By now, the skyscrapers lining 42nd Street should have been glistening in the morning's rays, but Sue honestly couldn't remember the last time she had seen any natural light, save for the haunting glow of the blood moon that hung ever-present in the sky above Manhattan. "A warm beverage for you," a synthesized voice said from behind her. She turned to see H.E.R.B.I.E, the Fantastic Four's robot assistant, extending his mechanical arm and offering her a steaming cup of herbal tea. "Thanks, H.E.R.B.I.E, Sue said, taking the glass from him and inhaling the gentle aroma wafting from it. "You're a doll." "Actually, I'm a humanoid experimental robot B-type. Integrated electronics," H.E.R.B.I.E replied. "Dolls are not capable of independent thought." "Of course not," Sue said with a smile. "Just a figure of speech." "You look concerned, Mrs. Richards," H.E.R.B.I.E said, hovering beside Sue as they both looked out the window at the city below. "Have things in the city taken a turn for the worse?" "Can't get much worse than the city locked in a state of everlasting night," Sue said. "Especially when the city has been infested with vampires. This may be the first time I've taken a break in, well, I've lost track of the days, honestly." "I have not," H.E.R.B.I.E responded. "It's been 6 days, 22 hours, 37 minutes and 12 seconds since your last." "I think I get the point," Sue said. "If I want to make a real difference out there, I need to start taking better care of myself and my family." "Well, that's what I'm here for," H.E.R.B.I.E said. "Despite the dire circumstances outside, I've made certain that all of Franklin and Valeria's needs have been met, so you may attend to more important matters." "Yes," Sue said, a tinge of sadness in her voice. "More important matters." "I'm sorry if the words I chose offended in any way," H.E.R.B.I.E responded. "I merely meant that at the moment the world needs you and Dr. Richards far more than your children do." "You don't think my children need me?" Sue snapped back, her frustration bubbling to surface. "Even after all we've done, the world is still falling apart, and instead of being there for Franklin and Val, I've handed them off to a robot nanny. They deserve so much better." I'm sorry you feel that way," H.E.R.B.I.E said, immediately turning and floating away. "H.E.R.B.I.E, wait," Sue called after him, but the little robot had already disappeared down a dark corridor. Sue let out a deep sigh. Her exhaustion had started to get the best of her, but since she had never been the one to stop fighting before, and certainly had never been the one to let those close to her down. She took one last sip of her tea and then headed towards her husband's lab, hoping that she would find H.E.R.B.I.E there so she could make amends. "Careful, dear," Reed said as she entered the lab. "I'm running a test on the chronovium samples Ben brought back from his last recon mission. I've got a fascinating theory about the effects of the crystal's chronal energy on damaged." "That's great, Reed," Sue said, cutting her husband short before he got lost in another scientific lecture. "Have you seen H.E.R.B.I.E by any chance?" "Not since this morning," Reed replied. "We had a bit of a disagreement." "You're not the only one," Sue said. "What was yours about?" "After Tony Stark and I started working together on a time stream reintegration device," Reed said, "H.E.R.B.I.E began to forge a friendship with Tony's virtual assistant Friday." "That's actually kind of cute," Sue said. "What's the problem with that?" Tony was going to allow Friday to pilot one of his Stark Sentinels on a mission into the city this morning. Reed responded. H.E.R.B.I.E asked if he might be able to leave the Baxton building to accompany her. My answer was unequivocal no. And I'm guessing he didn't take that well, Sue said. H.E.R.B.I.E wasn't built for combat, Reed replied, and he's so much more valuable to us here. I couldn't even begin to imagine how our family would fare if something were to happen to him. He's one of the few things holding us together. And you told him that last part, right? Sue asked, already knowing the answer. I might have been a bit too distracted by my experiments at the time to extend upon my reasoning, Reed replied. Nothing new there, Sue said, so H.E.R.B.I.E was already feeling undervalued, and I just went and made it 100 times worse. Hold on, Reed said, turning to one of the monitors in the lab. I'm picking up an emergency signal on our encrypted comms channel. It looks like it's from H.E.R.B.I.E, Sue said. He went out into the city anyway, didn't he? I'm afraid so, Reed replied. How did you know? We made him feel like he wasn't capable of doing something, Sue said, so he went out to prove us wrong. He's been spending so much time cooped up in here with Franklin lately. I guess our son must have rubbed off on him. I'll contact Ben and have him go to H.E.R.B.I.E's location as soon as he completes his current mission. No, Sue said. I helped make this mess. I need to be the one who cleans it up. H.E.R.B.I.E couldn't have made it far. Give me his coordinates and I'll get him back home safe. I'm sure you will, dear, Reed said. You always do. Sue exited the Baxter building and took to the streets, using her powers to bend the moonlight around her, rendering her body invisible. But even though she vanished from sight, she knew she still had to be careful. The vampires lurking in the streets would still be able to smell her blood. Fortunately, H.E.R.B.I.E's locator signal was only a few blocks away, near Grand Central Station. As Sue headed east on 42nd Street, she saw a horde of vampires engaged in a battle with an unexpected group of heroes. A scrappy scurry of squirrels. She was about to generate a force projectile to save the small creatures, but she then realized they were holding their own against the vampires. Perhaps they were a part of Squirrel Girl's personal army, Sue thought, and tiny rodents gnawed and clawed at their foes in a frenzy, and if they weren't, they certainly should be. As the chittering rodents chased the vampires from the scene, Sue continued on her quest to find H.E.R.B.I.E. But just before she reached Grand Central Station, she heard a voice behind her, but it wasn't mechanical here like H.E.R.B.I.E's. This one sounded ethereal, as if it was speaking to her from beyond the grave. I know you're there, lady, it said. She turned around and looked for the source of the voice, but couldn't seem to find where it was coming from. Down here, the voice said. Sue gazed down to see a small basset hound near her feet. Its semi-transparent body glowed a gentle blue. My senses work a lot different now that I'm on the other side, he continued. Can't hide much from this old pooch. I've seen you before, Sue said, kneeling down next to the ghostly dog. You belong to Stephen, don't you? I'm sorry, what was your name again? Bats, the haunting hound replied. And I don't belong to no one, but yeah, Strange and I do hang out a bit. I think the doc took off somewhere to try and get to the bottom of this moon mess, so I've been getting out of the sanctum on my own every now and then. Isn't he worried you'll be harmed? Sue asked, her invisible hand passing right through the ghost's dog head and as she reached out to pet him. Maybe, Bats replied, but he shouldn't be. First off, I'm already a ghost. It's not like I could die again. And second, you humans tend to underestimate what us little guys are capable of. Yes, Sue said, her thoughts drifting back to H.E.R.B.I.E. We do. Speaking of which, you haven't seen a small robot nearby, have you? I saw a robot alright, Bats replied, but sure as heck wasn't small. The dang thing crashed into Grand Central not that long ago. A big fancy hero like you might want to go and have a look. Thanks, Sue said, picking up her pace as she rushed down the block towards the terminal to see Bats was talking about. When she turned the corner, Sue immediately saw what Ghost Dog had described. One of Tony Stark's massive sentinels was embedded into the wall of Grand Central Station, its mechanical form severely damaged, sparking wildly. And there, standing on the robot's shoulders, was H.E.R.B.I.E. Sue used her force field energy to create a platform that elevated her to the same level as her robotic friend. There you are, she said. I was worried about you. It's not me that you should be concerned about, H.E.R.B.I.E replied. It is Friday. I detected her distress signal when her mechanical form was shot down, but she is no longer responding. Sue noticed that H.E.R.B.I.E's arm was extended to gently touch the side of the Sentinel's damaged head, and small wires had extended from his fingers, linking to a larger robot's exposed circuitry. So you weren't running away, Sue said. You came here to help her. I was not sure anyone else would, H.E.R.B.I.E said, even her maker. I'm certain Tony has a backup copy of Friday's operating system on file, Sue said. But who knows when it was made, H.E.R.B.I.E said. It might not contain any of her recent memories and experiences, including the friendship she's built with you, Sue asked. Affirmative, H.E.R.B.I.E replied. That's my primary concern, but it is only one of many. I know, Sue replied, and you have every right to be upset with me. I can't imagine how what I said back at the Baxter building made you feel. That's not what I meant, H.E.R.B.I.E responded, motioning towards the street below. I was referring to them. Sue looked down to see a group of vampires beginning to climb the damaged Stark Sentinel towards her. I'll take care of them, H.E.R.B.I, Sue said. You just focus on recovering your friend. Sue leapt down a firm invisible platform and engaged the vampires in battle, hurling force projectiles at some, while wrapping the others in containment fields. She wasn't about to let any of them sink their teeth into her, nor was she about to let them disrupt H.E.R.B.I's personal mission. As she continued to fight, one of her force constructs slammed the vampire into the heavily damaged arm of the Stark Sentinel. Upon impact, the arm seemed to repair itself instantaneously, as almost if time were rewinding. Sue couldn't believe her eyes as the giant robotic arm powered up and released a repulsor blast, knocking back several of her bloodthirsty foes. Interesting, said H.E.R.B.I, as he watched the damage undo itself. Dr. Richards recently shared with me his early research regarding time fluctuations, and that he believes they were caused by the crystallized chronal energy constructs called chronovium. I'm sure he would appreciate any additional data we collect in the field. Unfortunately, Sue didn't have time to explore the phenomenon any further, not even for her husband. The number of vampires was continuing to grow, and she could barely keep up with their attacks. The mental fatigue she had experienced earlier was now affecting her physically as well. She erected a force field around herself, preventing the vampires from reaching her, but she knew she could only hold it for so long. Do not fear, Mrs. Richards, H.E.R.B.I yelled from above, his metallic voice somehow reassuring. Help is on the way. Sue expected to see the rest of the Fantastic Four arrive in the scene, but instead a tiny armor of spider bots skittered into the sight. Some began to fire laser blasts at the fanged foes, while others detonated themselves around the vampire's feet. Never underestimate the little guy, Sue said, remembering what Bats had told her. Soon, the number of vampires had dwindled enough so that Sue was able to drop her protective field and finish off the remaining few herself. For once, she took great pleasure pummeling the vampires into submission. Are those friends of yours too, H.E.R.B.I said? H.E.R.B.I, Sue said, looking at one of the tiny spider bots. They are now, H.E.R.B.I said. They claim that they heard Friday's distress call as well and came running as fast as their tiny legs could carry them. Sue said, examining a spider bot more closely. They don't look like Peter's works. They tell me they were built by a different Parker, H.E.R.B.I replied. Penny, I believe. Though I may be mistaken, their programming language is decades beyond my own, and also in Japanese. Well, it's not their creator I should be thanking anyway, Sue. It's them and you. Me? H.E.R.B.I said, and surprised. Why? Because your little adventure reminded me of why we've been trying to keep you safe in the Baxter building to begin with, Sue replied. Because I am a valuable tool that you cannot risk losing, H.E.R.B.I asked. You're not valuable because you are a tool, H.E.R.B.I, Sue said. The reason we can't risk losing you is because you're family. Tools can be replaced. You can't. And while you may not have been designed to fight off vampires, maybe we haven't been giving you enough credit for what you're truly capable of. Your words touch me, Mrs. Richards, H.E.R.B.I said, deep in my central processing core. Glad to hear it, Sue said, wrapping herself and H.E.R.B.I in a shroud of invisibility. Now let's get you back home safely. Once we restore Friday's memory files and get them back to Tony, I'm going to talk to Reed about giving you a few upgrades. As it turns out, I'm perfectly happy just the way I am, H.E.R.B.I said, a smile flashing across the digital display in his face, though I suppose a few lasers could come in handy now and then. So from what we learned here is that Franklin and Valeria, so Val, both of their children, are alive in this universe and must be a little older as well, because Franklin could have rubbed off on H.E.R.B.I, so there must be, teenagers, which is interesting to see if both of these characters will become characters in the game one day. Franklin Richards will be an interesting one because he is one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel universe, so it'll be interesting to see how he would be. The other things that we learned from this is that if you've not seen the last episode, the Things storyline, Reed has created a smaller version of the time stream reintegration device, the TRD, and it does kind of like rewind time to a previous state. So this Invisible Woman one is obviously set before the Reed Richards one, because they took the data from here, gave it to Reed, who is then able to use it, and it's working fine. So what you see like in the map of Midtown, if you're shooting in a train station and you see Iron Man float the massive Iron Man robot float back up and the building goes back to normal. That's what they're talking about. So yeah, Invisible Woman obviously made it back, saved the gay everything, so she's probably just at Baxter Building. If we go to the Reed Richards one, we know that he was out with the Thing. They've met Black Panther, who's in his vampire state, but he's calm, he's controlling it. So that's what's currently going on. We also know that Spider-Man and Human Torch have been, helping each other out. Spider-Man is still currently here. From this story from Invisible Woman, we know that Penny Parker was here in New York because her robots are here. All the robots came through like a time stream. Somehow, they just stayed behind because there's no other indication that Penny is here. So that's that one. And the Thing is still just roaming around the streets, just helping out where he can. So that is pretty much where all of these characters currently are. I guess the most up-to-date story is the fact that Reed Richards has created a smaller version of the TRD, and it is what he's going to do with that next. They've also got to get Black Panther into his state, his normal form, whilst also figuring out a way to, I guess, either revert the time or take everyone to a new universe. So guys, if you did enjoy that video, please leave a like, comment down below. If you've not seen my other lore videos, then please check them out as well. And yep, hit that subscribe button. I've been Az. You guys have been awesome. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.